welcome to another edition of the Uplifting Menopause Conversations. And today's guest is one of my gurus when it comes to menopause. I just find all the information she gives us so down to earth and easy to digest. And she's just very, very on point and very knowledgeable about her subject. And her name is Dr. Zoe Hodson. And she's just amazing. So, Dr. Zoe, can I ask you if we call her Dr. Zoe, by the way, we don't do the Hodson part of it, but every time, I mean, it's funny because I use your name so much in all these recordings, and I keep it going, Dr. Zoe, and I wonder what everyone thinks, but this is her. And I just would love if you could give us a slight, history of where you came from, how you came to be doing this, because I know you have a massive background before you came to here.
So in medical school, general practice was very much seen as a lesser career. And it was always sort of hinted that you only did that if you weren't good enough to be a consultant, which I never wanted to. I loved so many subjects. I thought that I don't want to specialize in any of them. General practice is for me. And so, started GPing back when we still had paper notes. And we actually in our surgery had a little butler's lift that would carry the notes up and down, no computers, so a little while. And I've always had an interest in mental health, in women's health, in hearing stories and why somebody has presented at that time on that day. And that doesn't lead, again, I think over the years, general practice just became busier and busier and busier and more frantic. And I couldn't practice in the way that I wanted to. And I'd done the family planning clinic and then sort of thought, I don't think I'm doing menopause particularly well. Never had any training in it. And started reading more around it and then thought, this is what I want to do. So left the NHS, which I'd never particularly wanted to do, but I just thought I can't do this anymore. I can't practice in 7 to 10 minute appointments. It was making me quite unwell. And the menopause subject, I think, just brings all of the parts of general practice that I love together. The sort of the chronic health, the lifestyle, the nutrition, the psychology, women's health. It just is everything. And I remember friends saying, won't you be bored if you're just doing this? And it couldn't be further from the truth because every single person's story is different.
Very.
And I think this is why we always talk about individualized care. And this is why, because backgrounds are different and your journey right the way from childhood can have an impact on how you experience menopause. So it's an absolute joy to have those longer appointments, to be able to go through somebody's story, because this is just part of the story. This is not.
I agree with you. And I think it's, first of all, I just want to make it clear what the GP is and what a consultant is, because in America the system is slightly different. So in America you would go to a pediatrician or you would go to a gynecologist or a woman's doctor, whereas in England you always go first through your GP, which is a general practitioner, which has to know everything of everything, I think.
Yeah.
Then they will redirect you in the next step. If need be, only if need be. So they have, I think, a massive responsibility. And I think it's important that we say that they have this massive responsibility. And it's a big shame that the meetings have come down to, like you say, 5 to 10 minutes to say, you have to say so much in 5 to 10 minutes. How are you going to say it? And I understand, therefore, why you would have come out and gone to something that is so much more specific and you're able to give this help.
But we can talk through again how, if people are approaching their GP about their symptoms, how to structure that to make it the best outcome for both of you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
Okay.
that's really important. So let's first go into why I brought Zoe on, and we're going to be doing this as a series of a few different podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to go through the different stages of the menopause. So we have pre-menopause,
Mm-hmm.
menopause, and post-menopause. And I
peri.
what?
Got
Peri,
peri, menopause, post.
Post-menopause. I didn't realize that perimenopause. Okay, so that's where we want to go into. So let's start at the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So I wake up one morning and I start feeling, and I'm not feeling well. How do I know when it's premenopausal and when that's the question.
Yeah. So this is, and again, I think a lot of us are completely out of tune with our cycle. And it took me, and I did a little questionnaire on Instagram for people who specialize in this field, and most of us took 2 to 3 years to recognize our perimenopause, because the symptoms come and go, and you can attribute them to anything and everything. And I think as females, we have an absolute knack of internalizing, of self-apportion. So I am feeling this because I haven't done this. I am feeling this because of stress around me. I am feeling this. And it's often, again, I mean, I was absolutely shocking at tracking my cycle. I couldn't have told you when I was having my periods. That would have been helpful. So I think it was mine was when I looked back, and I remember it vividly. I looked back at a photograph from 3 years before where we had done an 8-mile walk in Yorkshire, and I suddenly thought, I couldn't do that today.
See, that's one part where we actually are very lucky. As Jewish women, we do really track our cycle because that's part of the whole ethos of what we're doing. I mean,
yes.
you know what I mean? So we're very lucky in that respect. So in that, that's.
And it's, I think, I mean, from what you said before, it's honored, isn't it?
It's very.
Yeah. Whereas as we just, as I say, I mean, it was sort of, I'd be really grumpy one day. I'd never figure out why. And then I'd start my period and it's like, oh, there it is again.
Yeah.
And it was
so
never
know that it's coming. Yeah.
Yeah. It was never cherished. It was never acknowledged. It was nothing. It was just something to just be dealt with.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that is, again, if this is where you do have that, again, if you are tracking your cycle, you can spot changes.
Yeah.
And so what's happening with the hormones is you're born with a finite collection of eggs. And I always say it's a bit like the marathon. So when you start, it can be uncoordinated. You can have something called an anovulatory cycle. So in the teenage years, you often have the cycle is a little bit hit and miss, and then it standardizes with a lot of people into a regular cycle. You know where you are. Not the case for everybody, but a lot of people. And then in perimenopause, you're getting to the end of the race. And we've just had the Manchester Marathon, and you will see that the competitors, the components, they're getting a little bit more tired, and they might not be the healthiest, and the speeds are varying, but you'll get the odd one that zips through. And that's exactly what's happening with your ovulation. And so this is where initially, when we're looking at stages, the first stage is that there isn't a significant change in cycle. A few little symptoms can be creeping in. And then you can start to get a change in the cycle and a few more symptoms creeping in. And then you can start to skip periods and some more symptoms creeping in. And then if you haven't had a natural cycle for a year, the day after that is menopause. So it's quite a fluid, subtle, and this is what makes it difficult to track in a way, because, as I say, the symptoms, again, they vary hugely. So there are a lot of mood changes, but you may find that some days you feel absolutely fine, and then other days you have lots of symptoms. So you can guarantee you book an appointment with your GP on the day that you're feeling absolutely lousy. You get there and you feel fine, and you think, oh, okay, maybe I was making this up.
Nothing the matter with me. Yeah.
And again, until I would say relatively recently, a lot of women had never even heard of perimenopause, had no idea what that was. And that can be, for a lot, the most problematic time with symptoms, because your hormones are fluctuating all over the place.
Yeah, haven't we seen that? I mean,
Mm.
Zoe and I have been doing these workshops, and it's just unbelievable how much people don't realize
Yeah.
are part of the menopause. It's unbelievable, actually. I'm sometimes quite shocked at how much we don't realize. So
Yeah.
it's fantastic that that you're explaining this so that everyone could, there is menopause happens and there's ways in which it flows. And hopefully by listening to this, you could put a name to the symptoms. I think that's really important.
I think the other thing is as well, a lot of the people I see, the flushes and sweats happened much later than the other symptoms. And a lot of people I see have never had them. And that was always the classic symptom, wasn't it, to look out for?
That was the first thing everyone tells you.
That you were permitted menopause when you were 50, when your periods had stopped, and when you were having flushes.
Ashes.
Nobody else is permitted any of this.
And the funny thing is, we all get, I mean, I found for me personally, the moods are first, not the hot flashes. That comes definitely, but the mood is really hard to. And like you say, as women, I mean, I always say this, as a woman, you go to your doctor and you say you're moody. Well, he goes, well, she's a woman. I mean, all women are moody, you know? and right away, well, you're moody. Oh, what's going on in your life? And then you get into that. So you forget the other things because you're so busy saying all these, oh, I'm moody because, and really you're moody because you have a problem. Your periods are,
And I think, again, we often say, let's clear out everything that's happening around you. We'll look at that, but let's put the symptoms on the table. So have there been changes? And if we go through, I won't be able to list all of them because there are many, but
could you send them? We'll put it at the bottom of the talk.
yeah. So if we, as I say, there's this, I'll link you to the menopause support booklet, and there's a symptom checker in there. But a lot of these, Lisa Mosconi is a neuroscientist, and she has just published a book called The Menopause Brain. And significant number of symptoms originate in the brain, and our hormones support our neurotransmitters. So when you start realizing that, it makes sense that your mood, and again, you get hints of this earlier on. So if you are somebody who has had real issues with things like premenstrual syndrome or something called premenstrual dysphoric disorder, which is a really debilitating form of that, if you've had things like postnatal depression, then that has already indicated that you have issues with fluctuating hormones, cyclical migraine, things like that. So that gives us a hint of how you could potentially respond to fluctuating hormones in perimenopause. Having said that, I will also see lots of women who say, I've never been anxious before. What is this? And it can be a real physical anxiety because it's driven by the sympathetic nervous system, the fight, flight, freeze. So again, you can get that waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning. There's something called a feeling of impending doom, where it just feels like something is going to happen, something is wrong, but you don't know what. So you can get palpitations coming with it. You can get dry mouth, air hunger, changes in your bowels. You can get mood fluctuations as well. So you can feel quite low. You can feel quite disconnected from people. And it's quite a vulnerable time a lot. And this is where it's been such a pleasure to do the work with the groups, because you can see when we go there that even sharing stories is so powerful. It's this little light bulb moment of, oh, I had that. Weird symptoms, itchy ears, feeling like ants are crawling on your skin, joint pains.
It's
frozen shoulder.
amazing what is considered a symptom that we
Yeah.
just look away from. It's amazing.
And it's only when, so in, as I say, with my 2 hours of menopause training in 10 years,
I think, could we say that again? Because I think
2
that's like
hours,
a really important, how many hours? In
2.
2 hours training to understand the menopause, which every woman goes through one way or another,
Yes.
right? And this is your client who's going to come in to
Yeah.
your GP's office, and all they give you is 2 hours. Now they're
In
giving
10
you a bit
years.
more, but it's
In 10 years.
unbelievable.
It's still not a mandatory part of the curriculum for gynecologists, for endocrinologists, for GPs. So this is one of the things that the Diane who wrote the booklet is campaigning for, because it's not fair on GPs either. So at all. So if I had seen somebody who had come in with a frozen shoulder, worsening migraines and cystitis, I would never in a million years have put all of those together at that time. And so there would be frustration on the patient's side. Why are these things not getting better? There'd be frustration on my side. Why are you back again with more symptoms?
You're wasting my time.
And we're all clueless. Well, it's frustration because fundamentally you do want to
Help
support
somebody.
patients and help. And even things, there've been some absolute light bulb moments. So even things with the pelvic floor symptoms, which often can start years before the other ones. And again, for some reason, I was gifted most of the urine results in the practice. I'm not quite sure why. And it was only after reading a book by somebody called Jane Lewis, and there was this light bulb moment that this could be linked to low estrogen in the pelvic floor. Recurrent cystitis, recurrent symptoms of thrush that people were endlessly self-treating, can be linked to low estrogen in the pelvic floor. And that, again, the number of people I've seen who've been under urology and had urethral stretches and all of these things. And every time I say now, did anybody ever discuss localized vaginal estrogen? No. And I wouldn't have done because I hadn't been taught.
Right. So we're changing the story. That's what
We
we're
are.
here for. And, I'm so glad that with today, it's becoming such a different subject. People are talking about it. Some people say we're talking ad nauseum, but I don't believe that that's the fact. I think the fact is the more we talk about it, the more it's going to make a difference to women's lives.
And just on that, because again, the age thing comes up time and time and time again. The average age of menopause in the UK is 50-51. The average length of perimenopause is 4 years. Perimenopause can go on for 10 years. 1 in 10 women will become menopausal between 40 and 45. Estimate about 3% below the age of 40. And that isn't even looking at all the people who have induced menopause from cancer treatments, surgical treatments, medical treatments. So again, we need to just open the radar much more. And if somebody comes with collections of symptoms, if we have that training there, the first question will be, could this be perimenopause?
Yeah. I mean, I myself, we were talking about this actually, the one that I released, the one went out today, one of our talks, and I spoke to Shirley Waller. Yeah, and she also from the Berry Health Initiative or something. Anyway, she was saying she's 63 and she has it still has the symptoms. And I was thinking, we really don't understand that this is not something that goes away sometimes overnight. It's a long haul. There's a lot to do for it, but only if you know the information. So let's go back to, how a woman comes to you. She just more or less, she says, oh, my periods are a bit funny. I'm feeling so. When would she come to you? When would this best?
What we're really looking at is when are symptoms starting to become impactful. So things like HRT are licensed for treatment of menopausal symptoms and also bone protection. Now in the all the way along, we spend a lot of time looking at lifestyle, because things like HRT are one part of the jigsaw. And I know there's a lot of frustration out there from people who can't have HRT or don't wish to have HRT, because everything feels a little bit polarized at the moment, and there's this pressure, in a way, it's gone the other way,
that's what I
to
said. Ad
have
nauseam, yeah.
HRT. And with or without HRT, this is really a time to step back and stock take. And again, I did this absolutely terribly looking back. I was getting more anxious. I was getting brain fog. So I just had more and more and more coffee to try and get my brain working, which then disrupted my sleep. I was spending longer and longer at work, so I was getting less and less time in fresh air. I was isolating myself from friends, and it just went down, 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 down. And there are so many themes that come through. And I think the hardest thing that I see over and over again is claiming rest. Yeah. And I don't know what the answer is. But when you look at all of the hormone pathways at this time, it's physiologically, it's a tough gig, this, because these hormones are so powerful and potent that they're impacting lots of other pathways. And we tend to find things, you can become more insulin resistant, so you're not processing your sugars as well, but it makes you crave sugar. So you've got sugar balance going up and down as well, which makes your symptoms worse. You've got disrupted sleep, which can impact your mood and your brain and your hunger. So it's all of these things. And I think, again, at the beginning, for some people, we look at lifestyle with everybody, and it's really sort of, right, okay, what could I change to support the hormone axis? And stress comes up over and over and over again. And that, I would say, is sort of psychological stress and physical stress. And we are not very good at resting. And I really struggled with that. And I see so many people struggle with that, because I'd always had the message that rest is lazy.
I was just going to say to you that that's it. Women will feel very, very vulnerable when they go rest.
Yeah.
Because they'll feel, oh, I'm being lazy. Why aren't I doing the dishes? Why aren't I doing this? Why is my house not up to par? Because I'm always tired. And this is it. We are constantly struggling with this feeling of guilt. That's what it is, pure and simple. We feel guilty for the resting.
And I think the problem is that in hindsight, I would have, but again, I know I wouldn't have done. I had to sort of almost collapse before I would listen to the wise people around me saying, well, now you have to rest because you've made yourself ill.
Yeah.
And it's very easy in hindsight.
Yeah.
And if I had, and again, it was a neighbor of mine who rephrased it as essential rest. And I thought, okay, I can get my head around that more. And it's been called rebellious rest. So that is, again,
like essential rest. I'm going to put that up.
And it is, because the physiology is all over the place. It's vulnerable psychologically. And you very often find that you need more quiet as well, because you can become very sensitive to noise, to light. So there's a symptom called misophonia, which is increased sensitivity, even to people eating, and crunching can just feel awful. And it just, again, a lot of people just feel this absolute need for some quiet space, but we don't get that.
That's probably why you disassociate yourself with friends also, because the chatter sometimes could just drive you crazy, because you're not on that. You don't, first of all, you can't even concentrate on what they're talking about. You're so tired. That's what it is. Your brain is so overworked. That's what.
And especially if you don't know what's happening, there's this constant, am I making this up? And the phrase you hear all the time, am I going mad?
Yeah.
And I think if you know that these are very normal hormone shifts, yes, they can cause a lot of problematic symptoms. But this is, again, if you know that this is likely to happen or can happen during this time, it's less frightening, isn't it, to start to experience it?
Okay, so that would be like the first thing that you would talk about with the person. And what would you say? I mean, would you right away say, go on to HRT, or what would your advice be?
It depends where. So I see some people who symptoms have been happening for a while. It's really, really impacting on their home life, on their work life, on their sense of self, on their on everything. And at that point, we will, if we have a discussion, and if they are keen, and we look at it as a trial of treatment. So this is not saying that you are going to stay on HRT for the rest of your life. This is, let's try it for 3 months and see how you respond. Now, again, with age, so over 45, the guidelines are clear that we don't need blood tests to diagnose perimenopause. Between 40 and 45, they could be helpful. Under 40, we need a clear diagnosis. Now, that isn't saying that other blood tests aren't helpful, because we're looking, again, if you've never had an NHS health check, now is a good time to do it. It's sensible, if you're feeling really fatigued, to look at other causes of fatigue. So it's not saying that no blood tests, but we specifically don't need the hormone blood tests over 45 to diagnose. And this is another reason why I love menopause so much, because medicine over time.
After telling us all these things, she loves menopause. Yeah.
But it's, again, it goes against. So I've watched over time medicine become more and more and more driven by tests. And I know, I mean, I get why, but you've lost some of the art there, because when I started and general practice, it was the art of the story first, and then doing the tests.